his mother smirking right behind him. "The house has been sold, Margaret," he told me coldly. "You have until Sunday to pack your things and get out." They expected me to scream, to cry, or to beg for mercy. They had spent months secretly plotting behind my back to strip away my dignity, my home, and every single penny I possessed, leaving me completely out on the streets. But as I looked at the legal documents and then back at their smug, triumphant faces, I didn't shed a single tear. Instead, I just smiled. You see, my husband and his mother thought they had perfectly executed the ultimate betrayal to destroy my life. What they didn't realize was that I had discovered their cruel plan weeks ago, and I had already quietly set a trap that would completely ruin them instead. My name is Margaret, and at 47 years old, I thought I had built a life that was completely unbreakable. For 15 years, I was married to Julian, a man I loved with every fiber of my being. We lived in a stunning, sun-drenched suburban home, a sanctuary we built together. But our marriage was never just the two of us. From the very first day, Julian's mother, Lydia, was an overbearing, permanent shadow in our lives. She constantly critiqued my cooking, questioned my choices, and made sure I knew I would never truly be good enough for her precious son. Yet I tolerated her cold remarks because I believed in family. When Julian decided to launch his logistics firm, I did not hesitate. I walked away from my own promising career and poured my entire inheritance, nearly $600,000, into his dream. I managed his offices, handled the grueling paperwork, and kept our home immaculate while he built his reputation. I sacrificed everything to elevate Julian, genuinely believing that his success was our success. What I did not realize during those long, exhausting 15 years was that my generosity was quietly breeding a toxic venom. Julian and Lydia did not feel grateful for my sacrifices. Instead, they resented my quiet strength. Beneath their polite smiles and casual dinner conversations, a dark, bitter plan was already taking root. They viewed my devotion as weakness, and behind closed doors, they began plotting to destroy my entire world. It started with a quiet rustle of paper in the middle of the night and the sudden, unexplained disappearance of our monthly bank statements. Whenever I asked Julian about our financial records, he would wave his hand dismissively, blaming a banking system glitch or claiming he had moved them to his office for tax purposes. But my intuition, honed by years of running his business operations, told me something was deeply wrong. I began noticing Julian and Lydia retreating into the study, speaking in hushed, urgent whispers that would abruptly stop the moment I walked into the room. Their guilty eyes and sudden, forced smiles sent a cold shiver down my spine. One evening, after Julian had fallen into a heavy sleep, I sat at his desk, staring at his glowing laptop. Guided by a nagging dread, I began digging through his files. That was when I found it, a hidden, password-protected folder labeled with Lydia's initials. Using a password I had seen him type 1,000 times, I opened it. My breath caught in my throat. Inside were draft agreements to illegally transfer the title of our beautiful home entirely into Lydia's name, alongside legal blueprints to deliberately declare corporate bankruptcy. They were planning to leave the logistics company completely broke, strip the house from my name, and file for divorce, leaving me with nothing but empty pockets and a ruined credit score. They wanted me destitute, homeless, and broken, while hammered against my ribs as I closed the laptop, but I did not scream, and I did not confront them. If I showed my hand now, they would simply find a more clever way to hide their tracks. Instead, I wore a mask of absolute normalcy. The next morning, I poured Julian's coffee with a smile and kissed his cheek, playing the part of the oblivious, supportive wife perfectly. But behind that calm facade, I was quietly initiating a war of my own. I secretly retained a brilliant forensic accountant named Marcus and a ruthlessly aggressive estate attorney. Together, we began digging deep into the company's financial veins. What we uncovered was far worse than a simple bankruptcy scheme. For the past 18 months, Julian had been systematically embezzling large sums of money from his own logistics firm, funneling the cash directly into an offshore account registered in the Cayman Islands, an account solely controlled by Lydia. They thought they were being incredibly clever, slowly draining the business assets so that when the divorce papers were finally served, there would be nothing left for me to claim. But they had left a messy trail of digital breadcrumbs, and my forensic team captured every single fraudulent transaction. By routing the money internationally to evade taxes, they hadn't just committed a civil wrong. They'd stepped directly into criminal territory. I held the ultimate legal leverage, and I was ready to use it perfectly. My trap was now fully set. The storm finally broke on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was sitting at the kitchen island, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, when the front door banged open. Julian strode in, his posture rigid and arrogant, with Lydia trailing closely behind him like a victorious general. The smug, triumphant sneers on their faces told me everything I needed to know before they even uttered a single word. Without saying hello, Julian reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a stack of folded legal documents, and threw them onto the marble countertop right in front of my tea mug. "The house has been sold, Margaret," he announced, his voice cold, hollow, and entirely devoid of any warmth or remorse. "The title is officially in my mother's name now, and she has finalized the sale. You have until Sunday evening to pack your things and get out." Lydia stepped forward, crossing her arms, her eyes gleaming with malice as she smirked down at me. "It is time for you to move on, dear. You never really fit into our family anyway." They stood there side by side, holding their breath, eagerly waiting for the inevitable. They expected me to scream, to cry, to fall to my knees, or to beg them for mercy. They wanted the satisfaction of watching me break. Instead, I calmly reached for the papers, looked them over, and let a slow, quiet smile spread across my face. Julian blinked, his arrogant posture faltering slightly. "Margaret, did you hear me? You are being evicted." "I heard you, Julian," I said softly, picking up the pen he had placed on the counter. Without a single moment of hesitation, I signed the release forms. Their smug smirks instantly vanished, replaced by a sudden, deep, and utterly delicious confusion. They were stunned. The next morning, I woke up early, packed a single suitcase with my absolute essentials, and walked out of the house without saying a word to Julian. They thought they had won, but the moment the grandfather clock in the hallway struck 9, my legal strike was unleashed. While Julian was likely pouring himself a victory drink, Marcus and my attorney were already submitting our massive file of evidence to the federal authorities and the court. Within minutes, a series of coordinated legal fires began to burn their lives down. My attorney successfully filed an emergency injunction, instantly freezing all of Julian's business bank accounts, personal assets, and credit cards. Simultaneously, we submitted the forensic accounting records directly to the IRS, exposing the Cayman Islands tax evasion scheme Lydia had so eagerly facilitated. We also flagged the fraudulent, backdated property transfer with the county registry, triggering an immediate fraud investigation that locked down the house title completely. Lydia's prized real estate transaction was frozen in its tracks. I sat in a quiet, cozy cafe downtown, sipping a hot latte, and waited for the show to begin. I did not have to wait long. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Julian. I declined the call, but a second later, a panicked text message came through. "Margaret, what did you do?" "The bank just locked me out of the company payroll. My cards are declined." A moment later, another text arrived, this one from Lydia, her usual composure replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. "The police are asking questions about the title transfer, Margaret. Pick up your phone." I did not answer. I just took another slow, satisfying sip of my hot coffee, smiling warmly as their corrupt little family empire began to completely turn to piles of cold, dry, gray ash. The conference room at my attorney's office was dead silent when Julian and Lydia stormed inside, their faces flushed deep red with sheer fury. They were ready to scream, to threaten, and to demand that I immediately lift the freezes on their accounts. But the second they saw the mountain of evidence laid out across the long mahogany table, their aggressive shouting instantly died down. My attorney did not waste a single second. He calmly walked them through the undeniable digital forensic reports, the forged signatures on the property documents, and the detailed records of their Cayman Islands offshore tax evasion scheme. The transition from arrogant rage to absolute, paralyzing terror on their faces was incredibly satisfying to watch. Julian's cold hands began to shake violently, and Lydia looked as if she might physically collapse right onto the carpet. They finally realized that they weren't just losing a divorce battle. They were facing severe federal prison time for grand larceny, forgery, and systematic tax fraud. With no options left and their high-priced lawyer quietly advising them to cooperate to avoid jail, they had to sign everything I demanded. The final divorce settlement was completely devastating for Julian. He was forced to see me, along with our beautiful, sun-drenched suburban home. Lydia was left entirely financially ruined, facing massive IRS penalties, serious criminal charges for real estate fraud, and a mountain of personal debt she could never hope to repay. They had walked into that office believing they were the kings of the world, but they crawled out of it completely shattered, stripped of their pride, their stolen wealth, and their dignity. I sat back in my comfortable leather chair, looked at the papers, and simply smiled. It was finally over. Today, I sit on the porch of my beautiful home, surrounded by blooming roses and a quiet peace I have not felt in 15 years. The logistics company is now thriving under my sole leadership, and every single penny of my inheritance has been returned to me with interest. I am finally free, fully independent, and financially secure, proving to myself that my quiet strength was never a weakness. As for Julian and Lydia, they're learning the hard way that greed always extracts a heavy price. Looking back, I am so glad I did not let anger consume me. I just smiled, made my moves in silence, and let justice do the heavy lifting. Now, I want to hear from all of you who have stayed with me until the very end of my journey. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have smiled and played the long game, or confronted them right away? Let me know your thoughts on